Welcome to the Sci-Fi Evolution channel. The lecture hall aboard the Orion educational vessel was filled with a quiet hum of enthusiastic students who had traveled light years to participate in this unique exchange program, a chance to explore the mysterious creatures known as Earthlings. Professor Xander, a towering figure with glowing skin, tapped on the projection tablet at the front of the room, and a list appeared in the air, scrolling through the list of substances. Xander's voice was steady as he explained. These compounds are classified as toxic, causing serious biological damage in most cases, some of them fatal if ingested, while others destroy organic tissues over time. The students nodded with their translucent eyes, absorbing the information. Some recoiled at the mention of certain chemicals, such as arsenide, elixir, and picrin. Others took careful notes, as their task was to observe Earthlings in their natural environment and record their interactions with these substances. The professor continued, "Your task is to observe people and record their actions and reactions to these substances." The students whispered among themselves. Some shared their thoughts on how to cope with the task. The terrestrial species, known for its carefree biology, was preoccupied with the idea of voluntarily exposing themselves to toxins. A field trip to the Earth settlement was organized, namely to the lively market on Novaya Zemlya. The students, dressed in ordinary clothes to be less conspicuous, followed their guide through the crowded streets. The air was filled with a variety of smells, some pleasant, others unpleasantly pungent. One student, a tall creature named Zephyr, stopped by a food stall. The Earthman was standing behind the counter, frying something on a metal stove. The scent was pungent, almost pungent. Zephyr checked his datapad and discovered that the substance plentifully applied to the food was picrin, a known irritant. The Earthman, a man with disheveled dark hair and a worn jacket, looked up. "Do you want to?" He picked up a small red fruit, its glossy peel glistening under the artificial lighting. "What is it?" Zephyr's voice trembled. "Chili pepper." The man smiled and said, "Come on, Z." He hesitated, considering the hood. It was dangerous, but the man decided to try anyway. He popped one into his mouth, bit into it, and chewed. His face didn't change much, although there was a slight perspiration on his forehead. "Oh yes," he said. "It burns, but that's the whole thrill." Z grimaced, thinking about how he consumes a biological stimulus for pleasure. The man put another one in his mouth. Z turned to his group, who were all consuming known toxins for pleasure. Another student, Vin, stopped at another counter. A female Earthling was stirring a bubbling pot. The steam was thick and almost suffocating. The students examined the contents. "Elixir, are you drinking this?" Win asked in horror. The woman chuckled. "It's called mushroom wine." She poured a portion into a cup. "It warms up. It's a neurotoxin," she said. Vin's limbs became stiff, and he realized that this was disrupting cognitive functions. The woman raised an eyebrow, and then took a leisurely sip. The students exchanged glances. "Only if you have too much." The catalog of harmful substances seemed to have no end. The students were amazed. A recording from the market captured a freeze frame of a man biting into a chili pepper. They remained motionless on the screen, all eyes riveted on the stage. Their physiological response was clear. Sweating increased, breathing accelerated, but they continued to consume pepper. The person's limbs curled inwards, which indicated discomfort, but they intentionally caused this discomfort to themselves. What is the evolutionary advantage of this? They seem to enjoy it. One person who used elixir even described it as warming. Professor Xander watched in silence, his glowing skin dimming with thought. "We need to determine if this is an anomaly or a widespread trait. Direct experiments will be necessary, conducted in a safe and controlled environment." Of course, the Zorians organized an official diplomatic meeting, inviting the Earth delegation to their ship. The Earthlings received it with great enthusiasm. After a few periods, the delegation arrived. 3 people, each of whom seemed unremarkable by the standards of their kind, boarded the ship. The leader of the group, a woman named Captain Valis, looked around the room with interest. Next to her stood a man with a scar on his forearm, and another man holding a steaming cup of what the scanner identified as Vigorex, a stimulant. Xander addressed them directly. "We were exploring the limits of human biology. Your kind?" The Earthlings seemed too impatient. "A controlled environment has been prepared." The Zorians prepared a series of test substances, each of which was marked as dangerous by their medical databases. The Earthlings sat in front of them, not bothering. The first trial included a picrin concentrate significantly superior to what the market samples contained. The scarred man, who introduced himself as Dylan, dipped a piece of neutral food into a burning liquid and chewed. A moment later, his face turned red, his breathing quickened, and yet he grinned. "Wow!" Vin's limbs twitched. "You are in acute pain." Dylan exhaled sharply. "Yes, but it's a good burn." The Zorians exchanged worried glances. The next trial included elixir in increasing concentrations. Valis took a sip of the liquid. The Zorians nodded and signaled for a stronger dose. "That's pretty mild," she remarked. The Zorians adjusted the dosage to a more powerful version. Valis took another sip and exhaled, then leaned back with a satisfied expression on her face. Vin checked the readings. "Your cognitive function must be impaired." Valis laughed. "Give it time." The next one was the Vigorex test. The man with the cup, Lieutenant Kyle, was already absent-mindedly consuming it. When he was informed about the test, he just raised his cup. Up ahead, the Zorians were puzzled. More experiments followed. Picrin levels reached levels that should have caused severe malaise. Dylan just asked for a glass of water. The concentrations of the elixir increased until even Valis admitted that she could feel it, although her motor function remained surprisingly intact. The doses of Vigorex exceeded what would be biologically appropriate. Kyle yawned and asked if they had anything stronger. The Zorians gathered in private. They metabolized toxins at an alarming rate. Xander finally broke the silence. "Your kind voluntarily comes into contact with dangerous materials, tolerates discomfort, and considers it entertainment." Valis nodded in agreement. The Zorians were speechless. Despite their extensive scientific knowledge, they had no basis for understanding what they had just seen. The sheer recklessness of it all was astounding. The Earthlings sat comfortably, completely unperturbed, as if they had just demonstrated an extraordinary level of biological defiance. Xander's bioluminescent eyes flickered erratically as he processed the information. The students remained calm, their eyes darting between the professor and the Earthlings, waiting for some explanation. "We need to do further research," Xander finally stated. "Your physiology contradicts all known principles of organic survival." Valis raised her arms above her head. "What do you mean?" The man's relaxed demeanor bothered Zorian the most. They should have been alert, worried, at least a little worried. Instead, they leaned forward curiously, as if they were conducting an experiment. Xander pointed to a nearby lab. "We need to analyze your physiological reactions in a controlled environment. Your recovery process is especially important." Dylan exhaled sharply, rubbing his stomach. "It's a good idea, as chili is already making its way through the lab." The students reacted as one when the lab was ready. People were placed in separate diagnostic chambers surrounded by scanning equipment capable of measuring everything from neural activity to metabolic breakdown. The process began immediately. Within a few minutes, the first anomaly appeared. Verilon adjusted the scanner. "Their cardiovascular systems are very variable." Kyle, still lying in the cell, raised an eyebrow, wondering if this was a bad thing. His heart rate fluctuated significantly, indicating distress. Valis shrugged her shoulders. It depends on what you did before the scan. Vigorex probably increased his heart rate. The students exchanged glances, realizing that this was another problem. The stimulant was used carelessly, but Kyle's body reacted as if it was normal. Valis tapped the side of the container. If we want to adapt to stress in our body, we need to change our lifestyle. This includes exercise, diet, and even adjusting to changes in our environment. Over time, our bodies adapt. Xander's bioluminescence dimmed. You mean that repeated exposure to harmful substances increases your tolerance? Dylan stretched his arms behind his head. More or less, if you drink regularly, your body processes the elixir differently than if you never consume it. Verulin's limbs curled up. You're deliberately exposing yourself to toxins to increase your resistance. Valis smiled. We call this the development of tolerance. The silence that followed was profound. The scan continued. Human digestive systems demonstrated resilience that defied logic. Picrin, which was supposed to cause severe malaise, only temporarily activated pain receptors before it was treated with minor consequences. Elixir, despite its neurotoxic properties, was metabolized at different rates, while the Valis system eliminated it faster. The results exceeded expectations, even when using Vigorex, a stimulant known to cause disorders. He seemed to integrate seamlessly into Kyle's physiology. Hours passed, and the Earthlings remained unaffected. In the end, Xander turned to the last and most mysterious observation. Your body is getting damaged, but you don't seem to be bothered. Valis glanced at Dylan, whose scarred forearm was resting on the side of his capsule. We're healing. Xander's eyes widened slightly. Explain. Dylan raised his hand. It burned a lot a few years ago. The skin has grown back, not perfectly but functionally. Zephyr's limbs tensed. Your body regenerates not instantly, Dylan clarified. But yes, cuts heal, bones heal, burns heal over time. Wine's eyes flashed. Your survival rate must be amazing. Valis exhaled. It depends. We take a lot of risks. Some don't pay off. But yes, we are tough. Xander studied them for a long time. Dylan, who had ingested the highest dose of Picrin, began to feel uncomfortable 6 hours later. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat and tapped his fingers on the armrest of the diagnostic capsule. His breathing was steady, but he was breathing deeper than usual. Xander was watching him closely. Are you feeling unwell, Dylan? Xander asked. Dylan chuckled through his nose. It's just that my stomach is letting me know that it's not happy. C corrected the scanner. Your internal temperature has increased. There are signs of increased acid production. Dylan let out a dry laugh. Yes, that's about it. The next deviation happened to Valis. The elixir had penetrated her system, but the scan revealed something the Zorians hadn't expected. Her liver metabolized the compound at an accelerated rate, breaking it down with amazing efficiency. Xander pointed at the display. Your metabolic function compensates for the toxin. Your body is actively neutralizing it. Valis nodded. Yes, that's what livers do. They filter out things that shouldn't be there. Vin studied the data, but the process was not uniform. Valis stretched. It varies from person to person. Some people can handle more than others. Others have an internal filtration system that is regulated more or less dynamically. Valis said it's not perfect, but it works. Xander was silent for a long time, processing this information. The human body has a built-in detoxification system that adapts to the effects. Unsurprisingly, they can regularly consume harmful substances. Kyle struck the last blow. Vigorex circulated in Kyle's system for hours, but he showed no signs of being unwell. In fact, he seemed more relaxed than at the beginning. See, the scanner has been adjusted. You must be experiencing disturbances in your nervous activity. Kyle glanced at him. Radical impulses, overstimulation, potential strain on the heart. Kyle chuckled. No, it's okay for me. On the contrary, I would be worse off without him. Vin's limbs clenched. You need a stimulant to function. Kyle nodded. Some people don't. It's a complete addiction, but it benefits the students. It wasn't just acceptance, it was integration. Earthlings didn't just tolerate toxins. Their bodies adapted to them, sometimes even depended on them. Then Dylan groaned. Everyone turned around. He clutched his stomach, his jaw tensed, and Xander stepped forward. Your condition is getting worse. Dylan shook his head. I just need to get through this. The Zorians were terrified. Get through this, Zephyr repeated. You're experiencing gastrointestinal discomfort, and it will go away, Dylan said, standing up. At worst, I'll get hurt a little bit. It's not scary. Vin's eyes widened. You're deliberately suffering internal injuries, Dylan shrugged. It's been worse. There was silence in the room. The Earthlings showed resilience, but it was something completely different. They didn't just experience danger. They accepted suffering as a natural part of life. Xander turned to Valis. How often does your species experience self-inflicted discomfort? Asked Xander. You've shown remarkable resilience, he said. This does not explain your willingness to tolerate what could have been prevented. There is no inner desire to protect yourself. Valis tilted her head slightly. Naturally, we have a desire to protect ourselves, but we don't let it control our actions. Zephyr's gaze darted. It's a paradox, Dylan chuckled. Not really. We're just avoiding certain situations. It would kill us instantly, but discomfort is a part of life. Look at them, still trying to understand. You are intentionally consuming harmful substances, allowing your bodies to suffer for the sake of entertainment. You are recovering from injuries that would incapacitate most beings. And now you claim that suffering is the norm. Kyle put down his cup. Listen, pain is a signal. It tells us that something is wrong, but pain itself is not always a problem. Sometimes it's just part of the process. Zephyr's limbs twitched. Valis gestured at Dylan. He was eating chili, right? His body protested, but he knew it wasn't a real danger. He endured it because the experience itself was enjoyable. Dylan smiled, and because he wanted to see how much he could take. Vin recoiled slightly. You're looking for your own limits. Kyle nodded. It's always how we improve. The bioluminescence flickered faintly. You're suggesting that voluntarily experiencing difficulties makes us stronger. Valis shrugged, saying, Indeed, it fosters resilience and teaches us what we can endure. Xander turned to Zephyr and Virilon, suggesting that their biology was an exception. The students absorbed this revelation in silence, their minds processing it. Valis leaned forward. Have you ever heard of vaccinations? Xander hesitated to explain, saying that we introduce small amounts of harmful substances into our bodies. Valis said, It's not enough to kill us, it's just enough to train our immune systems to fight back. Thus, when a real threat comes, we are ready. Vin's limbs clenched. You make yourself sick to prevent a worse disease. Kyle nodded. Exactly. C was silent for a long time. You don't just endure suffering, you use it as a weapon, Dylan grinned. Now you're starting to understand. Xander exhaled slowly. Your appearance is not careless. You are prepared. Valis smiled. We like to be prepared for anything. Vin shook his head. And yet, despite your resilience, you are still experiencing biological effects. Dylan patted his stomach. I can handle it. I regret to inform you that it was a bit chilly afterwards, but it was worth it. Valis hesitated, but she accepted the suffering for the sake of gaining experience. Valis nodded and said that this is part of growing up. We test ourselves, push our limits, we fall, but we rise stronger. Xander looked at them and said, That's why your kind survives. Valis smiled, and said exactly that. Zorian had no more questions.